The silence was deafening. In the controlled chaos of a Hollywood soundstage in 1972, where dozens of productions buzzed with constant activity, Soundstage 12 had gone completely quiet. Bob Munden, the certified fastest gun in the world, stared at the stopwatch in his trembling hand. The numbers didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. 0.19 seconds. It was impossible for any human being to draw a gun that fast, especially not a 46-year-old entertainer who was supposed to be just a song and dance man. But the evidence was undeniable. Sammy Davis Jr. had just shattered every record in the book, and Bob Munden, the man who held 18 world championships and had never been beaten in competition, could only whisper 4 words that would echo through firearms history forever. "Who the hell are you?" This is the untold story of the day. The world's fastest gunfighter discovered that talent has no boundaries, speed has no color, and sometimes the most devastating draw comes from the most unexpected place. Bob Munden was a legend by 1972. Born in Kansas in 1942 and raised on a ranch, he had been handling firearms since he could walk. At 30 years old, he held every meaningful quick-draw record in existence. 0.16 seconds for a single action draw, multiple world championships, and the respect of every gunfighter in America. Mundon wasn't just fast. He was scientifically, measurably, impossibly fast. He had been studied by universities, tested by the military, and verified by the Guinness Book of World Records. When Bob Munden drew his Colt .45, physics seemed to bend around his will. By 1972, Munden had become a celebrity in his own right, making television appearances and serving as a technical consultant for Western movies. Which is why he wasn't entirely surprised when he received the call from a Hollywood production company. "Mr. Munden," the voice on the phone had said, "we have an entertainer here who claims he can outdraw you. We'd like you to come in and settle this question once and for all." Munden had laughed. Hollywood was full of actors who played gunfighters on screen and started believing their own publicity. He had embarrassed dozens of them over the years, usually within seconds of meeting them. "Who's the entertainer?" Munden had asked. "Sammy Davis Jr." Munden's laughter died in his throat. Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just any entertainer. He was one of the most famous people in the world. But he was also known as a singer, dancer, and actor, not a gunfighter. "Sammy Davis Jr. wants to challenge me to a quick-draw contest?" "That's correct. He's been asking around Hollywood about who's the fastest gun alive." "Your name came up. Are you interested?" Munden's competitive instincts overrode his bewilderment. "I'll be there tomorrow." What Munden didn't know was that Sammy Davis Jr. had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Sammy's fascination with firearms had begun in childhood during his vaudeville days with the Will Maston Trio. Between shows, he would watch Western movies obsessively, studying the gunfighters with the same intensity he brought to learning dance steps or musical arrangements. Born in 1925, Sammy was now 46 years old and at the height of his fame. The Rat Pack era had established him as one of entertainment's biggest stars, but few people knew about his serious interest in marksmanship and quick-draw techniques. Over the years, Sammy had quietly become one of the most skilled gun handlers in Hollywood. He had modified his holsters with the precision of a master craftsman, studied the mechanics of the draw with scientific intensity, and practiced with the dedication that had made him a master of every other art he attempted. But Sammy's interest went beyond entertainment. As a black performer who had spent decades navigating racial barriers, he understood that respect often came from unexpected sources. If he could master skills that were dominated by white men, like lightning-fast gun handling, he could command a different kind of attention and respect. The soundstage had been cleared for the confrontation. Present were studio executives, a few invited guests, and most importantly, official timekeepers with professional stopwatches and electronic equipment that could measure draws to the hundredth of a second. Bob Munden arrived wearing his competition gear, a perfectly balanced Colt single-action Army .45, a custom holster designed for maximum speed, and the confident demeanor of a man who had never lost a draw in his life. At 30, he was in his physical prime, with reflexes honed by thousands of hours of practice. Sammy was already there, dressed casually but carrying himself with the quiet confidence that had made him a star. At 46, he moved with the fluid grace of a dancer who had never lost his timing or coordination. His holster appeared conventional, but those who looked closely could see subtle modifications that suggested serious study and preparation. "Mr. Davis," Mundon said, extending his hand with professional courtesy. "I understand you think you can outdraw me." Sammy smiled, that famous grin that had charmed audiences for decades. "I don't think anything, Bob. I just want to see what happens when we both do our best." Mundon appreciated the humble response, but he was still skeptical. In his experience, entertainers who challenged professional gunfighters usually lasted about 10 seconds before embarrassment set in. "Have you ever been timed professionally?" Mundon asked. "Never," Sammy replied honestly. "That's what we're here for." The first demonstration was Mundon's. He took his position at the designated spot, hand resting naturally at his side, eyes focused on the target downrange. The studio fell silent as everyone prepared to witness the fastest draw in history. "Draw!" called the timekeeper. Mundon's hand moved with inhuman speed. One moment, it was at his side. The next moment, the gun was in firing position, aimed at the target with mechanical precision. The blank cartridge fired with a sharp crack that echoed through the soundstage. "Time, 0.16 seconds, announced the official timekeeper. The small audience gasped. Even for those who had heard about Mundon's speed, seeing it in person was breathtaking. It didn't look possible for a human being to move that fast. Mundon holstered his weapon with the same fluid motion he had used to draw it. "Your turn, Mr. Davis." Sammy took his position, and something about his stance immediately caught Mundon's attention. This wasn't the posture of an amateur trying to imitate what he had seen in movies. This was the stance of someone who had studied the mechanics of the draw with serious intent. Sammy's hand hung loose at his side, but Mundon could see the coiled tension in his muscles, the way his weight was distributed for maximum acceleration. Despite being 16 years older than Mundon, Sammy's body showed the discipline and conditioning of a professional performer who had maintained peak physical condition throughout his career. "Draw!" called the timekeeper. What happened next defied everything Mundon thought he knew about quick-draw shooting. Sammy's draw wasn't just fast. It was fast with an elegance that made Mundon's technique look crude. The gun seemed to materialize in Sammy's hand rather than being drawn, flowing from holster to firing position in a motion so smooth it looked choreographed. But it was the speed that left everyone speechless. The timekeeper stared at his equipment, checked it twice, then looked up with an expression of complete bewilderment. Time, 0.19 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute. 0.19 seconds was impossibly fast. It was faster than should have been humanly possible for anyone, let alone a 46-year-old entertainer. Mundon stared at Sammy, then at the timekeeper, then back at Sammy. "That's impossible." "Run it again," Sammy said calmly. "I want to make sure it's accurate." The second attempt produced an even more stunning result, 0.18 seconds. The third attempt was faster still, 0.17 seconds. Bob Munden, the man who had never been beaten, the certified fastest gun in the world, had just watched an entertainer outdraw him 3 times in a row. And Sammy was doing it at an age when most athletes had long since retired. How was all Mundon could manage. Sammy's explanation revealed the depth of his preparation and the unique advantages he brought to gunfighting. "I've been practicing for 25 years, Sammy said, "but more than that, I approached it differently than you did. You trained for accuracy and speed. I trained for rhythm and flow." He demonstrated his modified holster, showing how he had adjusted the angle and depth to complement his natural hand motion. "Most people think the draw starts with the hand. I think it starts with the entire body. Watch." Sammy drew again, this time in slow motion. Mundon could see how Sammy's entire torso contributed to the motion, how his stance and balance allowed him to achieve maximum acceleration with minimum effort. Despite his age, Sammy's movements had a fluidity that came from decades of dance training and physical conditioning. "You draw like a gunfighter," Sammy explained. "I draw like a dancer who happens to be holding a gun." But the technical explanation couldn't fully account for what Mundon had witnessed. There was something else at work, something that went beyond training and technique. "You know what I think the real difference is?" Mundon said thoughtfully. "You don't just draw fast. You make it look like art," Sammy nodded. "That's because it is art. For you, this is competition. For me, this is survival. When you're black in America, when you've spent your whole life proving you belong in rooms where people don't want you, every skill becomes a weapon. Every talent becomes a shield." The words hit Mundon with unexpected force. He had always thought of quick draw as sport, as competition, as a way to prove physical superiority. He had never considered it as a form of self-defense against social prejudice. "You didn't just outshoot me," Mundon said slowly. "You outthought me." The age difference between the two men, Mundon at 30 and Sammy at 46, made the accomplishment even more remarkable. In a sport dominated by young men with lightning reflexes, Sammy had proven that experience, wisdom, and artistic approach could triumph over pure physical ability. "You realize what you just did?" Mundon said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "You just redefined what's possible in this sport." At 46 years old, Sammy's response was characteristic in its humility. "I just dance with the gun instead of fighting it." But Mundon shook his head. "No, it's more than that. What you just did changes everything I thought I knew about speed, about age, about what human beings are capable of." Finally, Bob Munden walked over to Sammy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not just drawing fast, Sammy. You're doing something that shouldn't be possible. You're not just a performer. You're a force of nature." The encounter between Bob Munden and Sammy Davis Jr. was never officially recorded in the annals of quick draw competition. Sammy had no interest in becoming a professional gunfighter, and the entertainment industry preferred to focus on his more conventional talents. But among firearms enthusiasts and those who were present that day, the story became legend. The day the world's fastest gunfighter, in his prime at 30, was humbled by a 46-year-old entertainer who drew faster than seemed humanly possible. Mundon returned to competition with a new understanding of his sport. He continued to win championships throughout the 1970s and 1980s, but he also began teaching a more fluid, artistic approach to quick draw that incorporated some of the principles he had learned from watching Sammy. Sammy, for his part, returned to his entertainment career with the quiet satisfaction of having proven himself in yet another arena. But those close to him said the encounter with Mundon had given him a new confidence, a deeper sense that there were no limits to what he could achieve if he applied his full dedication to the task. Years later, when asked about the fastest draw he had ever seen, Bob Munden would always give the same answer. Sammy Davis Jr., 0.17 seconds, 1972. And the man was 46 years old. "I still can't believe it." The lesson of that day went beyond quick draw records or entertainment industry legends. It was a reminder that talent recognizes no boundaries, that excellence can emerge from unexpected sources, and that age and experience can sometimes triumph over youth and raw ability. Sammy Davis Jr. had spent his career proving that a black entertainer could succeed in a white industry. On that day in 1972, he proved something even more fundamental, that mastery belongs to those who pursue it with complete dedication, regardless of what anyone else thinks is possible or appropriate for their age. Bob Munden had come to the studio expecting to embarrass an amateur. Instead, he had met his master and learned that the fastest draw in the world might belong to someone who approached the skill not as competition, but as art. The stopwatch had shown 0.17 seconds, but the real measurement that mattered was the respect of a man who had never been beaten, freely given to someone who had just rewritten the rules of what speed could look like at any age. In the end, that respect was worth more than any record, and the memory of Sammy Davis Jr.'s impossible draw would outlast any championship, any title, any official recognition. Because true speed isn't just about how fast you can move, it's about how quickly you can change people's minds about what they thought was possible.